Welcome to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast. I am your host, Estelle Bingham, and together we'll be delving into the profound meaning of love, the driving force of purpose, and the beauty of connection that shapes the fabric of our lives. In each episode, I sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals out there to understand the ways love has touched them. Kelly McDaniel is an author, mother, licensed professional counsellor, and women's advocate. Her first book, Ready to Heal, started a movement where she termed attachment injury as mother hunger. Millions of women around the world resonated with this concept, and since then, she's devoted her whole career to helping nurture maternal deprivation and insecure attachment styles in adult women. In her second book, Mother Hunger, Kelly speaks to women who suffer with a lifelong emotional burden that adversely affects self-worth, eating patterns, and relational wellness. Welcome, Kelly Daniel, to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's so wonderful. And actually, this is one of the conversations that I have most looked forward to because I am so excited about your book. I absolutely love every word of it. And I was initially, told about your book by a client of mine who had been coming to see me, and for the mother wound, because of this mother wound story, which is what I meet a lot in my practice. And she'd said how wonderful it was for her. And then I read the book and I really got it. So it's just amazing to have you here. And I really feel this conversation is going to be so valuable for so many people listening.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that introduction of how you found the book.
Yeah, it's amazing. So let's just, break it down for everyone and really understand, I suppose, how the mother wound found you.
Well, it's interesting. The book, Mother Hunger, I think is definitely connected to the mother wound, but they're different. The mother wound is a name for the epigenetic inheritance that as women, many of us have, because there's been generations of difficulty for women that gets passed down. Mother hunger's a little bit different. It's almost what happens from the mother wound, that we miss out on certain things that we need because we're little humans. We're basically little mammals, and there are basics that we need for optimum brain development. And these are what mothers provide, these essential elements. But when I was trying to write the book, I had to look up, what does a mother do? I tried to find the definition of a mother so I could somehow write about the fact that I'd been treating mother hunger, but I hadn't tried to write about it. And I couldn't find a definition anywhere of what makes a mother. What is it that she does? And in fact, the definitions I found said things like, mothering is to care for someone as a mother would, as if we should just know what that is. Mm-hmm. So in operationalizing what a mother does, I really listened mostly to my clients and what they were yearning for and searching for in generally romantic love relationships or friendships was nurturing, a kind of affection and attunement, a quality of love, looking for protection, a sense of safety, a sense of security, and then ultimately a sense of guidance, an inspiration, someone who is admirable, that we could look to for how do I be a woman? What kind of woman do I want to be? That's a later developmental need. Nurturing and protection are the two most essential things we need as little humans in order to develop a secure attachment.
So they really are, the nurturance, the protection, and the guidance are the three pillars that you have found working with your clients. Those are the things that when they're in place, you can go as a daughter, you will not inherit mother hunger, or you will not it won't grow in us, right? It's like
That's
if we
right.
can go out into the world and those things have really been met inside, then we'll have a very different experience of the world. And if they're not met, which is, my own experience is actually why I do the work that I do, which is why I realized that my work is so informed by the mother wound and sort of mother hunger, those sort of two pieces, the experience that comes from the wound, and alchemizing that. If that doesn't happen, then it really affects our ability to love, like you say, our attachment style, our ability, to build friendships, to be successful, but we can be successful, but then we may be really adrenalized, or, the inflammation in the body, all sorts of, there are so many outcomes from unexplored or, unmet mother hunger.
Yes, exactly. Unidentified. I mean, without a
Unidentified.
name,
Yeah.
we didn't know. And many of these attachment needs, the needs for nurturance, the needs for protection, are so primitive and so young. We need them before we can even speak.
Yeah.
So when they're not available, it causes a heartbreak. And that's why I call mother hunger an invisible, almost unidentifiable heartbreak that we're kind of walking around in the world with. And we can soothe that heartbreak in all kinds of ways. And sometimes we do that with food. Sometimes we do that with our work. Sometimes we do that trying with other people to fill in that, that pain, that emptiness, that sense of what's wrong with me. And no one can quite fill that in. So that's where the healing begins, is to kind of identify, oh, there's something beneath all this struggle. And it's a heartbreak.
I'm so happy when I to hear you say that, but also when I read that in the book, this really very visceral and visual idea of what happens, because the heart also carries memory, as we know, and my work is heart work, and it is breaking. There is a total heartbreak when we come into the lifetime, and I love the way that you also really talk about, what it's like to be in vitro, what it's like to be in the womb, that it starts there. I write about that in my book too. I mean, we know that science has really caught up with that. But, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people did not feature this. And from an energetic point of view, so when I work energetically, I'm often given visuals of people in the womb and what's happening for them in the womb. And so, I love the way that your book describes that, because it's so real. If mum's been ambivalent, if she's been grieving, if she's not really up for it, she's not prepared, whatever's happening for mum, and all of that, that's actually building that first environment. And you talk about, our first environment for love, and it's so true. Come into the lifetime, we come in with these, we're sort of like building ourselves, and then we arrive and with expectations, because the expectations are just to be loved, because it's all we know. So in that very primal, we experience everything is an emotion. So, and I think that how you pointed that out is so brilliant in the book, about when we are lonely. Okay, if those basic pre-verbal experiences are are not being met, our needs are not being met, then we actually just we understand those as like you say, we go into a heartbreak. We don't have a reason why. We're just in a heartbreak. We're like, I'm not getting picked up right now. This is heartbreaking.
Exactly. So an infant in a crib left to cry it out doesn't understand why all that little baby body is registering is, I'm alone and I could die, because babies aren't meant to be alone. And if they were left alone in primitive kinds of cultures and cried, that could alert a predator to the whole tribe. Babies weren't left alone. They were carried, they were held, they stayed close to their mother. And that's how we're designed. And so this industrial way of living where we're in cribs is not where our brain has developed. We have not developed to grow up in isolation. And a whole lot of thinking in the early 1900s was that we could train babies to be independent. And that way they would grow up and be strong and be able to compete and work. And what I have found is that's not at all the case. That if those needs are not met when we're young, they follow us around and they will find a way to be met in other ways. And as adults, that doesn't always look really good.
So back to this idea of actually mother hunger being an attachment injury. And I really, I think, again, that's something really important to think about. So many of our listeners will be thinking, will know about attachment styles. And if we, we can kind of maybe sort of give some more information around what this attachment injury is, in relation to the attachment theory.
Thank you so much for using the language beautifully from the book, because I think when I was studying attachment, I kept bumping into the word attachment disorder over and over. And it just didn't resonate for me that this is not a disorder to have an attachment style that's less than secure. According to the science, at least 50% of us have an insecure attachment style. Well, nobody really wants to be called insecure. And that's just a name that's been given for research. But what I have found is, I think it's probably more than 50%, but let's just say it's 50%. Those are the folks that are in our offices, right? We're not getting the securely attached people coming to therapy because they're trusting themselves. They feel pretty good in their lives and in their body and in their relationships. And they make decisions that line up with their values. Those of us that are on the insecure attachment spectrum somewhere, whether that's we're more anxious in our relationships, we're more avoidant in our relationships, perhaps we're disorganized in our relationships, we don't feel good in our own skin, in our body, or we don't necessarily rest easily in the comfort of other people. And we have found ways to soothe the loneliness. And we usually found these very, very young. When I was writing the book, I like that you pointed out epigenetics. The science is still so fresh and so new, and I'm so grateful to the researchers like Rachel Yehuda that have given us concrete research that shows what happens to infants in utero and how critical the formative years are. And what I have found is that I needed a separate category because mother hunger is on a spectrum, just like attachment, right? Maybe you had a nurturing mom, but you weren't safe growing up. She wasn't either. Maybe your mother was very protective and yet cold. And so the nurturing wasn't there. Or let's say your mom didn't have an opportunity, I'm saying you, the general you, to develop her own dreams. So she wasn't able to guide a daughter to do that. Those are forms of mother hunger. But what I was finding that typically gets named disordered is that women who had a mother who was terrifying, an abusive mother, had to bond with her anyway. So the attachment system is in service to bonding before protection. So we're going to bond even to a mother who's unkind, unwell, perhaps, and dangerous. That I call third-degree mother hunger. It's also going to produce a disorganized attachment style. And I find that there's not a lot of great writing about disorganized attachment. We've got a lot out there about the anxious and the avoidant, but lots of my clients needed more explanation about this disorganization. And they didn't need labels like borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder. Those diagnoses may help with medication, but they create a lot of shame and can get in the way of healing. So I really think we need to look at these personality adaptations as the ways we survived. We had to bond to someone who was inherently dangerous or untrustworthy. And so our personality adaptations can get pretty complicated and might be very disturbing for other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're just literally nailing it right now, Kelly. I'm just so excited because it's so, I mean, it's really the depth of the depth of the work. I mean, again, from how I work, which is energetically and this real forensic way of understanding the nuances of this really of this attachment injury, right? It's this idea of the third degree mother hunger, sort of this third degree, and what that really looks like. Because yes, firstly, that's why I do my work, and I've alchemized that third degree injury through my spiritual practice and through what I bring through with the sort of divine feminine and through the heart work. I've had to alchemize that, and that bonding with the dangerous mother, I understand, I know very, very well. And also it is so prevalent. So when we think about 50% of people being anxiously attached, or the attachment being disordered in some way, it's really, I mean, it's kind of, is it 50-50, or is it more like, I don't know, 70-30? It's widespread. And what happens is it's touching all of us all of the time. Again, I think we spoke about it at the beginning, this idea of an unidentified mother hunger, wound or injury. That is that becomes very, very dangerous, because again, it's dangerous in you, because we will end up, either passing that on, or it triggers us in our day-to-day life, and we don't know why it's doing that. We can't make good, create good relationships. But also it's this idea of what, this what's being handed down to us. We are the unloved daughters of unloved daughters.
That's right.
And this epigenetic story sort of goes beyond even what's happening in the womb. It's from the grandmother of the grandmother of the grandmother, who, has been treated a certain way, has felt a certain, that those feelings are in her cells, right? They're markers, those trauma. When we've experienced trauma, one of our ancestors has experienced trauma on the female line, and it comes through the male too, but really strongly in the female. All of that womb energy, it's just being carried down, whether it's sexual violation or repression or hardship or trauma, like what, and again, it's this idea of this deep mother hunger that often we're carrying in our lines, really profound. Hi, it's Estelle here, and I'm so excited to share my new book with you, Manifest Your True Essence, Clear Your Blocks, Find Your Joy, Live Your Truth. This is more than just a book. It's an invitation to come home to your heart. Within its pages, you'll find the guidance to reconnect with your true essence. Through gentle meditations, heart-centered practices, and soulful wisdom, you'll learn how to release old patterns, embrace your divine spark, and manifest a life filled with love, purpose, and connection. You can pre-order Manifest Your True Essence on Amazon or wherever books are sold, and begin the sacred journey back to your heart today. Remember, you are love, you are light, and you are infinitely powerful.
I love the way you use the word, if we're an unloved daughter, we probably were born to an unloved daughter. And it reminds me, though, to emphasize how I think mother hunger can emerge even from very loving, well-meaning mothers, because the truth is, it's not necessarily about love. A mother may very much love her child and not be providing adequate nurturing protection because she doesn't know how, and because our cultures do not support healthy attachment. They don't support a mother bonding with her infant in the way that the infant actually needs, because lots of medical professionals and people that are out there helping with birth and with pediatrics are not trained in attachment. They're going to try to help a mother survive the difficulty of motherhood, not necessarily help her attach in the way that infant might need. So lots of misguidance out there for parents. And that's what I was also hoping this book could help with, is to reformulate what we actually think mothering is and how critical it is and how important it is, but also the fact we live in a culture that doesn't really help. So this is not about blaming mothers. And in fact, it was kind of scary to write the book. I was afraid it would be used that way. I'm so grateful it has not been. That if anyone is into reading it or listening to the book, there's so much compassion for the fact that this is an inherited legacy that is born inside cultures that prioritize competition and disconnection and greed instead of human interdependence and connection and attachment.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's just, I mean, that's so beautifully put, actually, Kelly. And I just wanted to really, just for anyone who's listening, to think about coming back to these things that culture keeps us sort of in separation from, or makes it difficult for us to mother in the way that we're kind of, we're born to, sort of even naturally. Like you look to nature, we look to nature, and that image of sort of a mammal leaving a little baby mammal to kind of just cry it out, like that wouldn't actually happen in nature, and suddenly there's a sort of visceral reaction to that, like, well, of course that wouldn't happen. But let's just kind of go back to the 3 pillars and just give a very brief overview, just so people can think about, even in this moment, just reflect on, did you experience these 3 things? You touched on them in the intro, but like, let's just go back to those. What is nurturance? What does protection look like? And what is this idea of guidance a little bit later in life?
Good. Yes. Thank you for circling back. And I think that's important because we adapt to our early caregiving environment. So most of us don't even understand we have a broken heart. We don't know what we missed out on because we don't know what we were supposed to have. So my hope in identifying these elements that are so essential is that we can learn about them and therefore begin to replace them. We become our own mother, in other words. So the need for nurturing involves feeding in a timely way, not on a schedule, but when the baby's hungry. It involves sound, touch, the cooing. It's smell. It's the smell. We're already in love with the smell of our mother. We know her sounds. We know her heartbeat. We know her body. We're already in love. So we want proximity, and proximity to our mother's body is what will feel best to us as infants. And infants learn what love is through touch, through these sounds, through food, through feeding and holding, through nurturing. That is the language of love, because it's not enough that a caregiver loves the child. The caregiver needs to actually hold and spend time with and be present for this growing infant. And I think that we put infants into lots of too much alone time, too much separation from the mother that they're already in love with. And those separations are risky. Children are resilient and they can recover quickly from separations if the caregiver can be present and can soothe the hurt that comes from separations. And nighttime sleep is a separation. Daycare is a separation. And these separations don't make sense to a young developing mind. So it can create crying and difficulty, and parents think, what's wrong? Well, nothing's wrong. This is the baby's way of communicating. So we grow up, if we didn't have adequate nurturing, with a little crying baby still inside, a little girl inside who wants her mommy, didn't get what she needed. And we don't necessarily know why we then overeat or undereat to soothe ourselves. We don't know why we feel unlovable or ashamed. Because as little ones, if our needs are not met, it doesn't occur to us that something could be wrong with our caregiving environment. Yeah. It doesn't occur to us that anything's wrong with our mother. It just means something's wrong with me. I must be unlovable because these things are not happening. That's how the little brain makes sense of it, because it would be impossible to acknowledge there's something about my caregiving environment that's not adequate. That would be terrifying. which that leads to protection. Infants need protection. Toddlers need protection. Children need protection. Adolescents need protection from so many things that are scary, but mostly from a sense of being alone. Like children can endure adversity very well without a trauma occurring if they have a consistent caregiver who makes sense of what's happening.
Yeah.
So kids can go through natural disasters, they can go through horrifying events, but if they have their caregiver there who's loving them, who's making sense of it for them, even if that is a rupture in the family, a divorce, if the caregivers are present and making sense of it, trauma does not necessarily have to happen. That's how resilient we are, but it's also how dependent we are on human connection. It's the most important need we have. It trumps everything else. So even in a fearful situation, if we have a healthy connection, we're going to be okay. If we don't have the nurturance, we don't have a healthy bond, and something happens that makes us unsafe, we're going to have a traumatized reaction that can be very enduring without intervention, without support, without help. So protection is essential. And protection looks different at different ages. So good gosh, the world that we have now where mothers have to protect their children from these devices, phones and the internet, it's astounding all that parents really have to do. And then guidance does come a bit later. And this is where I see the mother hunger changes somewhat for little girls and little boys. Boys may look to the world of men for guidance. Girls are going to look to their mothers to figure out what do I want to be like? What do I want to wear? What are my friendships going to be like? What will my dreams be like? And it's lovely when a daughter can look to her mother and say, even unconsciously, I want to be like her. The shame that I hear from daughters who say to me very quietly, I was embarrassed by my mother, or I felt like I was older and more mature than my mother. I mean, the sense that even in saying that they are betraying their mother it's very, very difficult. And I see daughters, part of the legacy of mother hunger and the reason it's so hard to identify can be that it feels so wrong to say anything real or true about our mother if it's less than positive. Anyway, I hope I'm kind of helping explain those three pillars.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, there's so much there that I kind of want to dive into. I'm going to actually just start with that last piece, which is what it's like when, in my experience, we start to, be with and unpick this idea of the parent, mother, and also father, that, and actually coming in and allowing, giving permission in the first few sessions to talk about that experience, but, obviously not in a merged codependent way where we're kind of doing that thing where we're breaking apart, and we're actually individualizing, right? That's where we start to reparent. That moment where we're going to be remothering, reparenting is the moment where we allow mum to be who she is in isolation. Like, we're born alone, we die alone. That's what I always say. And we're souls on the planet and we meet each other along the way. We grow from each other. There's huge wisdom in these relationships, but we have to break apart so that we can actually just notice and see, who mum is, and give her permission to be who she is, and give yourself permission to also be who you are, right? So that breaking apart means, okay, yeah, like mum, I was neglected. Sometimes it's the hardest thing for women to, and I say people because I know there'll be some men listening to this episode, and mother hunger is absolutely male and female. I mean, I know you talk about the daughters, Kelly, but it's across the board, right? From, if it's there.
It is. Because human needs are not gendered.
They're not gendered.
We're little mammals. So the need for nurturing and protection is the same regardless. Now, we do live in a culture, though, that tells little boys when they're very young, you can't feel a whole wide range of feelings. You can't tell the truth or talk. You must fight. You must be strong. And I find that a lot of men have a hard time, heterosexual men in particular, identifying mother hunger because they don't identify many feelings at all.
Mm.
And many heterosexual men are living with women who are nurturing them, who are caring for them. So they never identify their mother hunger. Their partners may realize that they have it because they're tending to it. But a lot of men don't resonate with this term. And I don't think it's because it's not there. I think it's because of the way the culture has set us up for this.
Well, the culture set us up for, like you say, from a very early age, we have feelings and we start to bury them. And so, and like you say, in the sort of patriarchal, that expression of itself is, you know, boys don't feel feelings, and that's what that,
Right,
so they have to just carry that, which is so
right,
painful.
right. It's
Um,
so painful.
so painful. So, what we're really interested in now, I suppose, is this idea, and you spoke about it because, and I read it in the book too, and I also mention it in my book, the bridge. How we do this in a way that, and again, we're not always going to get it right because we are perfectly imperfect. We do get things, every day we're going to get it wrong, and make mistakes. The term right and wrong, like, let's dump that. But like, we're going to make mistakes every day. So, but this idea of the bridge. So when something's happened and um there's been a trauma that it's not a trauma yet, but some things could be traumatic, but you bridge in that moment with a conversation or an explanation or some love, again, because people are going to want to know, well, Kelly, how do I make this right? What can I do? And I say, bridge in the moment when something's happening in the day to day. Just take the time, pause, and bridge. How would you add to that, Kelly?
I love this terminology you're using, the bridge, this idea of a bridge. And I wonder if you could tell us some more about it, because it's a lovely term.
The bridge as an idea is, I have an example in my book where a child will come home from school really, really excited. So say you run through the door and you've painted this picture, and you get home and mum, she's had a really tough day at work. She's on her emails. She's cooking supper. You might have a sibling, or she's just distracted and not interested. And in that moment, what we can do with that feeling is, if we sit with that, and that's allowed to just stay all the way through eating supper, going to bed, and we internalize, it's like we digest that feeling, and that becomes something about us. So we then say, I'm not good enough, right? I'm not I've been rejected. So that's a betrayal. It's a disappointment. It's a rejection from mum, and it's abandonment. So we take that in, and we start to, that starts to kind of, that's a layer of what for me, it goes into the shame wound, right? So we're sitting then, we're experiencing shame around parts of ourselves. If mum at some point within the kind of 3, 4, 5 hours that kind of, come after this incident, sits with the child, the daughter, the son, and says, oh, you know what? you know what, my love? I'm so sorry about what happened earlier. Mummy wasn't, I wasn't, I was actually really distracted. I'm so sorry. I really want to see your picture. Let's have a look at your picture now. And sits down and looks at the picture and says, wow, that's so amazing. I'm so proud of you. This is beautiful. You're fabulous. Okay. What happens in that moment is that there is this connection, what we're kind of bridging, and so that the trauma that could then be internalized and is a layer, a layer of shame, right? It goes right into our shadow and it goes right into our shame wound. And this is the attachment injury it becomes mother hunger, right? We can actually diffuse, we can actually alchemize. There are ways that this doesn't have to land in the psyche in such a destructive way, because of course that one picture is when these small betrayals, these little cuts are so annihilating for us, and again it comes back to this heartbreak. Like, it's so much more than we're running in with our creativity, with our joy, with our fearlessness, with our hope, with our excitement. with our blossoming self. And when we're not met in that moment by the mother, it is utter annihilation, because that's how it shows up energetically for me.
Beautiful description. And I would imagine that anyone listening to your description, myself included, as you framed the repair, the mother coming back into connection with her child, with warmth, with regret, with an apology and new behavior.
Yeah.
There's not a disconnection then. Kids are so resilient. I mean, this does not create an attachment injury when there's, the way you say, a bridge like that. And even listening to you explain it gives me warm feelings. And I would imagine anyone listening to that, because that's love. And when we see love or hear about love or watch it or experience it, we feel warm. That's how we know what love is. We feel warm. When we go days, hours, weeks, months without that warmth and no repair effort, that's what creates this heartbreak. That's what creates an enduring pain, because we're not designed to be cold. We're not reptiles. We're mammals. We have a limbic system that is so large, and that's where our empathy is and our love is. That's where our attachment happens. And that is not the prefrontal cortex that comes on later in life that makes sense of what's happening in the world. This limbic system is primitive, and it's with us at birth. And it's where all of our emotions are and where we learn what love is. And I think that lots of well-meaning, loving parents don't understand the impact of day-to-day interactions, facial expressions, tones of voice, the ways that disconnection becomes a heartbreak if it's not repaired. And so the repair efforts often don't happen. That's where it's unfortunate, and where we end up with mother hunger and an enduring heartbreak into adulthood. Then the work becomes our own work to realize, oh, I missed this essential element of nurturance, or I missed feeling safe as a child. Now it's my job to give that to me, or to find people who can nurture me in a healthy way, to feel safe, which is really challenging in a world where the news is full of scary things all the time, and natural disasters are increasing. And there are lots of reasons that we're frightened, and we need each other more and more to help with that fear that's very real. But lots of us experience the fear more intensely because we've been afraid since we were children.
It was so amazing, Kelly. I just love all of your words. I'm just so into everything you're saying. It's wonderful. And well, actually, we're kind of coming to the end of the podcast, but I just want to drop on into two things very quickly. The loneliness piece, because of course we talk about the heartbreak, and then this huge sort of loneliness. And again, it's something I see every day, just that emptiness, this void. If you're in that void, know that you are not alone, and that you can transform that feeling. You can transform that feeling. Talk to me a little bit about loneliness, and then we'll just talk about that last piece that I want to come back to about reparenting.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, I think the concept of loneliness has been something that carries so much shame with it that it's been very difficult for people to talk about. And if there was any gift from COVID, it's that loneliness came out of the closet. That everyone was experiencing loneliness, regardless of gender. And so it quit being just a woman's issue, and it became a human issue. And so more people are talking about it now. But I like to differentiate between solitude and loneliness. We all need solitude. Solitude can be comforting, regenerating. We can rest and recover from the demands of relationships and life. That's wonderful. Loneliness is when we feel that we cannot connect or belong to the people we care about, and it's because something's wrong with me. And because something's wrong with me and I cannot connect, the loneliness turns into what the term is that I like is condemned isolation. And that is what hurts. That's where the shame is. That's the sense that I can't belong or connect. I'm lonely because of me, because there's something inherently wrong with me. And that's why I'm lonely. So there's shame that goes with that. And that's what makes it so unbearable and so different from solitude. That term, condemned isolation, I learned in graduate school. It's not my term, but I think it's perfect for understanding the mother hunger heartbreak.
It's so perfect. It really is. And actually that brings us to, I wanted to sort of end with some things that people could do in terms of this reparenting, remothering piece. And I read in the book that they can be actually, and I these small gestures of sacred things, creating sacred space in your world. So you mentioned like a really, having a really beautiful bath, or listening to a wonderful visualization, or a great podcast, or, just these very small tweaks in our day can actually start to transform and alchemize your mother hunger.
Exactly. So if you can identify missing early protection, which grows into adult anxiety and fear, one way to make an environment more safe might be to really be responsible and cautious with the media intake that can up and adrenalize your whole body, because your body's already adrenalized. I think understanding that maybe I missed out on some nurturing might mean I need to take a nap more often, or a hot bath, which can feel like a human hug, can be really, really helpful when we're sad and lonely. So it's more than just a spa day, right? Or go get your nails done. There's this whole movement about taking care of yourself like that. Sure, okay, but that's different than what I'm talking about. And it's about the intent. If the intent is, okay, I'll go have a spa day because I need to be mothered, that's lovely. If you have the resources to do that, that's lovely. But if the intent is to take care of a hurting heart, you can do that in lots of ways, with a cup of hot tea, a very slow walk, listening to gentle music while on a walk, or while going to bed, or listening to your podcast.
I'm so grateful to you, Kelly Daniel, for your wonderful work that you're bringing to the world. It's so beautiful and profound, and so inspiring. And I'm so grateful for you joining me today on the Love Purpose Connection podcast. It's been an absolute joy.
Well, it is a wonderful pleasure to speak with you, and your grasp of this topic is so lovely. And I think that someone listening to you and having the benefit of your podcast is a form of guidance. So you're filling in the work that you're doing, what so many of us need, which is good guidance. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. So much love. Thank you so much for listening to Love Purpose Connection with me, Estelle Bingham. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd really appreciate that. And if you really liked it, then leave me a review so I can keep doing what I love, healing one heart at a time. You can also follow me, Estelle.Bingham, on Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest releases. If you feel in need of some extra guidance, then my book, Manifest Your True Essence, could be helpful. You can find it online or in any major bookshop. In the meantime, thanks again for listening, thanks again for watching, and I will join you on the next episode of the Love Purpose Connection podcast.